I am the ambassador of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, permanent representative to the African Union. My name is Ngadu Ilunga, and my country, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, joined as a full member the Peace and Security Council since the 1st of April 2024. And it is important to indicate that this is the first time our country joined the Peace and Security Council since it was established in 2004. So almost 20 years after the establishment of the Peace and Security Council. And then another first is that during the month of November 2024, the DRC, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, was given the opportunity and responsibility to chair the Peace and Security Council for the month of November. Now, this is a very important development for my country, and therefore it is a particularly important situation that we are part and parcel of the process of promoting peace, promoting security and stability in the continent. And it has been for us, and of course for all our colleagues, members of the Peace and Security Council, a very important responsibility, because at this particular time, unfortunately, so many conflicts are afflicting our continent. In every corner of the continent, you find terrorism, you find rebel movements, you find armed elements inflicting horrible tragedies to millions of Africans. As we speak, 12 million Africans are refugees because of those conflicts. About 30 million are internally displaced because of those conflicts. And this is a terrible increment, because 10 years back, the number were almost half of those I mentioned, which means that the situation is not improving. It's unfortunately becoming more dire, especially for the civilians, victims of these conflicts. So therefore, our vision as we joined, as we had the responsibility to lead the process in the Peace and Security Committee, was to put an emphasis on what can we do together as the Peace and Security Committee on the basis of the mandate given to us by the protocol that created the Peace and Security Council, to get more results, concrete results in the promotion of peace, in prevention of war, in consolidation of peace, so that these terrible tragedies inflicted to so many African people can be reduced. That's why we had a number of activities that were lined up in our discussions. We reviewed the situation in Libya. As you know, the situation in Libya is extremely worrisome. Electoral process that was supposed to help reunite the two parts of Libya, which are at the moment at loggerhead with one another. This process has not yet given result. So we hope that with mediation being conducted by His Excellency President Sassou Nguesso and many other stakeholders, the Libya situations will be brought to a stabilization and a return to democratic process. We also put an emphasis on the issue of DDR, demobilization, disarmament, and reintegration, and equally to the issue of the post-conflict reconstruction in countries emerging from war. Why did we put a very important attention on this aspect? Because many countries who reach peace agreement, then come the challenge of disarming the former combatants, demobilizing them from the armed structure, and then reintegrating them in society. This process in Africa has extremely been challenging because if we don't administer properly programs that will offer alternative opportunity, socioeconomic activity, training, reintegration into the society, reconciliations, transitional justice, those former combatants might not have interests in remaining peaceful. They might go back to being harmful to society. So successful disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration program for a situation of country emerging from war is a sector where Peace and Security Council and all member states, our partners of the United Nations, European Unions, and others should put more emphasis. We had a very important meeting in Kinshasa with the Peace and Security Council. We adopted a roadmap of Kinshasa on steps that need concretely to be taken to have successful DDR program. While also in Kinshasa, we discussed the issue of post-conflict reconstructions, because it is well and good to disarm, to demobilize, but if you don't have programs that would rebuild those basic social infrastructure, school, health facilities, as if you don't have programs that would relaunch socioeconomic activities, agriculture, livestock development, some small industries that would offer jobs and then rebuild societies, then this is going to have a very fragile post-conflict situations. So to have a robust post-conflict program properly funded with all necessary activities in all sectors of economy, you are going to have a situations of fragility. So we will not have a sustainable peace. We will not have a durable peace. So we also put a lot of emphasis on the issue of early warning, which is one of the key elements of prevention. The challenge we have in Africa in dealing with early warning, not only in Africa, it is almost a universal challenge. While instruments exist, mechanisms exist to collect information, to analyze information, to detect early warning signals that shows that such and such country is likely to get into an open war or an open crisis or an anti-constitutional change of government. But unfortunately, you still have this issue of sovereignty. Peace and Security Council is sometimes hesitant in analyzing those facts and then taking courageously all the preventive measures ahead of time so that these early signals of risk of conflict are dealt with as they start to show a sign of aggravation. So early warning mechanism, but most importantly, courage, political will to intervene using the instrument of mediation, using the panel of the wise, using the good offices of the chair of the executive council, of the commission. Those activities, timely activities to prevent fragile situations to culminate into an open conflict. This is the area we discussed during our mandate, and very concrete recommendations were made how to reinforce the early warning mechanisms and the preventing activities. Another area we covered, which is of very high importance. Whatever conflict situations you look into Africa, you see that it's always around exploitation of illegal resources, mineral, forestry, and any other natural resources are the source of conflict. Most of the rebel groups or militia or terrorists survive by exploiting illegally important natural resources. The money they generate from these illegal exploitations is allowing them to buy arms, to recruit new elements, and then to perpetuate wars and conflicts. And as we said, with terrible consequences for humanitarian sector. So we looked together in the Peace and Security Council the issue of how do we strengthen the mechanism to really mitigate and combating illegal exploitation of mineral resources by rebel groups, by terrorists, by armed militia, so that we can make progress in reducing the nuisance of these movements and allowing peace or silencing the gun to become a reality. Very concrete programs, very concrete recommendations have been made in that regard. And then we had a final, very important ministerial meeting. This important ministerial meeting that actually closed the period, the chairmanship of DRC of the Peace and Security Council was chaired by Her Excellency Madame Wagner Kaikwamba, the Minister of State for Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of our country. Her leadership during this concluding ministerial meeting allowed very fruitful discussions and conclusions. The main objective was that program was to make a sort of an evaluation and assessment. Do we as Peace and Security Council have all the mechanism, all the power, all the capabilities to make sure that all the 55 member states of the continent do obey and comply to their obligation under the fundamental instrument, legal instrument that they've adhered to, all of them, which is the Constitutive Act, which is the protocol that established the Peace and Security Council. Because we had the conviction, and we share these convictions with all the members of the Peace and Security Council, that unless and until the Peace and Security Council has the courage to act decisively to promote full compliance by all member states of a number of pillars, fundamental cornerstones of the creation of the African Union, unless and until we are able to promote that, it will be very hard for peace and silencing the gun to become a reality. What are those fundamental principles? I think from the very first day of the creation of the African Union, the founding fathers established very clear principles that are embodied into the Constitutive Act and the protocol creating the PSC. One, equality of member states. All member states are equal. There are no member states that are superior or inferior to others. There is no one member state which is above the law. So all the legal instruments will apply to each and every member state equally. Second principle, it is forbidden for any of the African Union member states to interfere with internal affairs of any other member states. And this is born about as a result of another key principle, which is of the sovereignty of each member state. Each member state is sovereign in dealing with all matters concerning its citizen, its governance, and all its active economic and other matters. There is no right for any other member state to interfere with governance and sovereignty by each member state. Another key principle is full respect of territorial integrity of each member state, which means that there is no member state who is allowed to interfere with the territorial establishment of any other neighbor or other member states, because this is usually source of conflict and war among member states. Another key principle is respect for national unity and that is also linked to territorial integrity. Another final, very important principles which the founding fathers of the African Union established since 1964, and it has been also revived later on with the Constitutive Act, is that however bad we might feel about the borders that constitute each and every of our member states, we must respect the borders inherited from colonial days. It should be respected and remain intact. So I think yesterday, during the ministerial meeting, it was a consensus among ministers of PSC member states that we have to call on each member state of the African Union to rededicate themselves, to recommit themselves to the full compliance with these sacrosanct principles, because these are conditions sine qua non for effective promotions of peace, security, stability in the continent. So in other words, we should say that the various activities we had culminating with yesterday's meeting are now giving us again to the Peace and the Security Committee a sort of roadmap, so that issues such as sanction, which also were considered, because it is well and good to reaffirm the adherence to these principles. But what do the Peace and Security Council do if member states, one or any other member state, will not comply? So we discussed the importance yesterday of reviewing the scope of power to be given to a subcommittee of the PSC that will be dealing with sanctions. Because so far that subcommittee deals only with sanctions against states that have gone through a military takeover, which is an anti-constitutional change of government. But it said nothing about other violation of those sacrosanct principles. In other words, the DRC is very happy to have humbly contributed during its chairship of bringing together our member states in reflecting on how do we strengthen our working methods, or do we courageously make sure that we bring every member state to comply with the sacrosanct principles, so that we are in a better position to promote peace, to promote stability, to promote understanding among member states. Silencing the guns requires so many responsible action to be taken by each and every member state. And the Peace and Security Council should have the courage to accompany the member states towards an Africa where there will be more peace, more security, better governance. Because we also realize some of the root causes of those wars are to be found in poverty, exclusion, bad governance, weak governance, corruption, and lack of access by the community to basic necessity of life. This sort of exclusion for the socio-economic necessity of life might drive a certain part of the youth and the community to join the rank of what is called negative forces. So, holistic approach is needed. It's not just a question of silencing the guns, it is a question of governance, it is a question of reconciliation, it is a question of better governance, it is a question of economic development with a better shared resources in each and every of the African states. It is doable. It is challenging, but it is doable. So that will be my first word. After this 1 month of joining colleagues in the Peace and Security Committee, we found that solutions exist, political will should be harnessed, funding should be obtained for programs that will correct social injustices, socioeconomic injustices. Hope should be given realistically to everyone in society. And then each member state should avoid by interfering with other states' affairs, supporting rebels' movement from a neighbor, or facilitating acquisitions of guns, etc. All of those issues should be dealt with holistically. Voila. So we think that it has been a very, very productive exercise. So much still needs to be done to implement strategies and activities that would progressively bring the much needed peace, security, stability, and economic development, because it boils down to justice. Justice in economic, justice in the distributions of sanctions or rewards, justice in having equal attitudes, justice in making sure there is no double standard in the way we deal with resolution of issues and challenges affecting us. Thank you very much.